The price of a barrel of benchmark U.S. oil plunged below $0 a barrel yesterday for the first time in history because of crippled demand and a storage glut. Now, traders were willing to pay $40 a barrel just to get somebody to take the oil off their hands. The contract for West Texas Intermediate crude is the benchmark for U.S. crude oil prices, and it crashed 300% yesterday to minus $37.63. But what does that all mean for the average person? Here to discuss this is the Straits Times senior transport correspondent Christopher Tan, as well as economist at CIMB Private Banking Seng. So Chris, let's start with you. Now, U.S. crude prices are back in positive territory today, but does a drop in crude prices translate to a drop in fuel pump prices in Singapore?
I think eventually, but probably not so soon. Pump prices are more closely related to something called mean of Platts, which charts the prices of finished products, refined products, the wholesale prices of petrol or diesel. And these prices are not publicly available. So you have to be a subscriber to Platts to be able to get these prices. So the only prices that the public and motorists get to see are crude oil prices, which are actually publicly traded and very easily available. So with WTI and Brent prices at record lows, we expect wholesale prices to eventually move in tandem, and then next, pump prices. This may take several days and several weeks.
Right. Well, Seng-Wen, what do you think?
Well, to add on to what Chris said, I think we must remember we are in tiny city-state of Singapore, very small. One very important scarce resource is land. And this is where things get more complicated when it comes down to pricing of different goods and services. In that for the competing needs of land, which is anything from home, offices, factory, foreign worker dormitory, crematorium, hospitals, care center. Essentially, we have competing needs. So very important to also bear that in mind, in that we're not just talking about one of the material important ingredient, which is the crude oil or gas itself, but the multi-layer behind that in terms of the cost of acquiring the space for the little pump station, the workforce behind them, the different government regulations and duties behind them. But as I said, ultimately, we do see the lower price of the most important input, energy, basically trickle down into for motorists or for transport companies in general, but generally with a lag.
Well, Chris, back to you. In an article you wrote on this, you said that motorists have long complained that pump prices often reflect an increase in oil prices quickly, but are slow to reflect drops. Why is that?
So this is a perception again that people have when they see crude oil prices, which are again easily available, but they don't see the prices of the finished product, the wholesale prices of petrol, wholesale prices of diesel, right? They don't see that. So when they see crude oil price move, they expect an immediate reaction to the pump prices. But the fact of the matter is that it takes some time for it to filter down. First of all, it goes to the finished product, the wholesale price of finished products, and then later to the pump price. And this pump price is influenced by a whole host of other factors besides crude oil price and besides the price of finished products. Now, the Competition Commission of Singapore actually did a study in 2017, which stated that we found that on average, pump prices actually moved up slower than they did move when they moved when they reacted faster to drop in crude prices than they did in increases. Now, this, of course, is average. Now, the person on the street, the man on the street will not see average. Just like we don't feel train performance, MRT performance according to MKBF, right? We see it to we feel it more when we get on a train when we're late. So when they see prices of crude oil moving, they expect an immediate response, and when they don't see that immediate response, they feel that something is amiss.
I see. Well, let's talk about the airlines now. Seng, how will the oil markets affect the already struggling industry?
Good questions, except it would have been brilliant if there were if things were normal, as in people can travel, people don't have issue with lockdown. But obviously, at this juncture, when people cannot travel, there's lockdown. We've got obviously pressure on airlines. Only I think today, the Australian second largest carrier, Virgin Australia, I think into voluntary liquidation because they just basically don't have any top line revenue because nothing is going on above the air itself. And so we got issue for almost, I think, all carriers around the world. The longer this lockdown, the longer travel restriction remains in place, there will be more pressure on airlines in particular. So not a surprise to see what's happening out with the airlines itself. What we have to essentially see is what kind of help we can extend to them in an environment where there's no revenue cost, but there is still ongoing cost to maintain the fleet, to keep staff, operational costs, etc. Going for we don't know how long. But for consumer, again, as I say, we don't have a choice. We cannot just say, okay, we jump on the plane and travel to Bangkok like they normally do. We do have prices of plane ticket coming down, but I think if you want to go buy a plane ticket now, A, you cannot get them, and B, it's probably very, very expensive as well.
Well, Seng, falling oil prices, is this something we'll continue seeing as things remain uncertain in the global fight against COVID-19? And if so, what does this mean for an economic rebound as well as inflation?
Well, inflation is straightforward. Again, multi-layers in that when we have a recessionary environment, we have potential job losses, company failure. That basically means weaker demand, and weaker demand usually means softer asset prices, whether it is to buy homes or whether it is general spending. But the other side of the equation, when we come down to a deflationary environment in current situation where there's travel restriction and lockdown, is on the supply side. And if there are going to be hurdles to supply, whether it is masks coming from certain countries or rice from certain countries, if there's disruption to those supply chain, costs may go up. So we may see airlines not being able to offer any plane ticket or plane ticket are cheap if you can go anywhere. On the flip side, prices of food may be higher because of travel restriction and lockdown pushing prices higher. So for inflation in general, whilst lower energy costs will obviously help in the grand scheme of things in a whole deflationary cycle, but inflation, many more layers to it, harder to tell, but generally we would say recessionary environment tends to lead to lower inflation or deflationary environment, especially in the current environment when we have travel restriction and a recession where we don't know how long and how deep it may persist.
Well, thank you very much for your insight, gentlemen. We've been speaking to Seng, an economist at CIMB Private Banking, as well as senior transport correspondent for the Straits Times, Christopher Tan.